Hello, we've been spending the last few episodes going over the skill sets I think it's necessary today to get in and be successful in the self-storage business. This has been a deep dive into some of the skill sets that I wrote about in an article for Inside Self-Storage. Today I want to talk about a skill set that I think is critical for you to have that maybe 5-10 years ago you didn't have to have. Let's talk about that today. My name's Mark Helm. I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Self-Storage Quick Start Academy. And what I do is I support small investors who want to get in the self-storage business or who want to strategically grow their self-storage business, do so in a way that creates true wealth and a fulfilling career. And when I first got into the self-storage business, the skill set I'm going to talk about wasn't something I had to know. So I'm assuming as a small investor, you need more than a 5 or 6% return on your money. I'm also assuming that you don't want to build a facility and go through the 2 to 4 years of negative cash flow it may take before you hit break even on that. So I'm assuming you want to buy an existing self-storage facility and want to figure out how to do it and get the rates above 5 or 6% return. And how you do that is, and we've been talking about it, the value add play. Now, the most important part of a value add play, and probably the best way to add value, is to put more self-storage in service. Buy existing facility and then add more self-storage. So we talked last week about how to design a construction budget. If you didn't watch that last week, it was episode 182. Go to creatingwealththroughselfstorage.com, YouTube channel, however you get this information, and watch that. Because today I want to talk about running a construction project. Now, I know many of us, myself included, did not want to get in the construction business. We just wanted to be in the self-storage business. Unfortunately, given the market conditions, with prices being as expensive as they are, if you want returns north of their double-digit returns, you're probably going to have to be in the construction business as well, or at least overseeing construction projects. Yes, you can get a bid and turn it over to a general contractor. I don't recommend that. Even if you have a general contractor, you want to be very involved in the process to keep that cost down so you can bring the new self-storage in at a much lower cost than you're buying the existing one, blending the two together and getting a decent and good return. So I'm going to talk about a construction project, kind of the spaces and what's involved in running one for a self-storage business. So for this episode, I'm going to assume it's an expansion. Most of what I'm going to talk about works whether it's a conversion or new construction, but I'm going to assume you're buying 25,000 square feet and adding another 25,000. Those are the ways I think it's the safest for a new person to get in the self-storage business today. Now, we use construction managers. Yes, I've been a construction manager, believe it or not. I'm someone with zero construction experience before I got in the self-storage business. The good news is self-storage just isn't that difficult. Yes, there's tricks to the trade. Yes, there's things you have to do. But at the end of the day, you've got somewhat level ground, a concrete floor, and a steel wall and steel building. A little more to it, but not much more. It's pretty simple construction. If possible, I reckon we didn't do it this way, or I didn't do it this way, but if possible, I recommend cutting your teeth on a single-story drive-up suburban style self-storage if you can. My first construction project literally was a conversion where we put 2 stories inside a building. You know, I did it, but the simplest is a drive-up single-story building, the typical one everyone thinks of when they think of self-storage. If that's your first project, it'd be a good one to learn on. Like I say, we use a construction manager. Right now we're using a construction manager because we're in multiple states, have a number of projects going on. There's no way I can manage or my team can manage 2 or 3 construction projects at once, but I could manage a project if I had to. My coaching to you is get a good engineer. In my world, our world, the self-storage world, the engineer is probably the most important person in the whole mix, maybe besides the construction manager or you. If I was building an office building or an apartment complex or a restaurant, probably the architect is the pivotal person. But for us, it's usually the engineer, because there's just not that much architectural work in a storage facility. We're not building something that future civilizations will dig up and marvel over. We're building something that maximizes the return on the money that we're spending. So we have engineers lead and steer the process. Let me go through, and this isn't going to be detailed, but let me go through the steps or the spaces that are involved in a self-storage construction project. I want to give you a sense that it's not overwhelming, and that with team members that can support you in areas that you may feel uncomfortable at, it's literally something almost anybody can do it. Believe me, I can do it, you can do it. So typically when we put a facility under contract, the very first thing I do is order the feasibility report and then immediately try to find an engineer in the area where we're going to be buying the facility. Right now we have a primary engineer that's not in that area, and we usually go through them, and then they locate an engineer because they know what we want and they can speak engineering language. But I didn't always do it that way. Don't know if I'm going to do it that way in the future. It adds some expense. But what you want is an engineer who's, in a perfect world, has had storage experience in the past and knows the players that are going to be involved in approving the process. That engineer is going to guide you. They'll tell you how complicated or uncomplicated it is, what's going to be required for the approval process, how long it's going to take, if you have any weaknesses, where your weaknesses may be, what's going to be involved in the site work. And we have the engineer drive the whole approval process. They're also the ones that will do the site work drawings, and they usually tell us who are some of the best site work contractors to bid. The site work is usually the piece of the puzzle that could be very small or very large, and a lot depends on the requirements of that municipality, what's involved. Water, can you have surface water runoff, or does it have to be underground? Do you need a retention area? Do you need a holding place to hold rainwater? The engineer will advise you on all of that. So we're selecting an engineer, and then at the same time, I'm sending to a self-storage fabricator the survey of the site plan, and I want them to do a preliminary layout for us. It used to be they did it for free. Nowadays, I pay for it. I want to pay for it. Why? Because I want to own it, and I'm going to get other bids off that. So if one company just gives it to me, I feel funny giving it to another company to bid. But I pay for it, I own it, and I will get as many bids as I want from that initial layout. I usually tweak it once or twice. Then when the layout is how I think it looks, I immediately give that to my engineer, and then the engineer will see if there's any problems with it, like setbacks, drive lanes, easements. Often we've had to adjust it to get larger trucks in and out. But the engineer will work it and tweak it. Now, interestingly enough, in most cases, architects create the building plans for the approval. We've done that, but mostly we've had the site work fabricators generate the plans. An architect will tell us, we'll have an architect. They'll create the renderings if we need it for the approval, but I try to keep the architect at bay as much as possible. And if more is needed for the approval, such as an electrical plan or a life safety plan or whatever, if more is needed, the self-storage fabricator will give the architect the CAD, and then the architect will add to it. Usually it's included in our cost to get building plans with the self-storage system. Also in the building plans are the concrete specs. The self-storage company's engineers will spec what the concrete needs to be for their system, and then we can give those plans to the concrete subcontractors to bid. It usually saves a lot of money. Architecturally, I'm usually only paying for them to add to the plans if needed, maybe help us a little bit on the office area, and create renderings if are needed for approval. Everything else I usually get through the engineer or the self-storage fabrication company. Now, I could just turn the whole thing over to a GC, but I'd pay a lot more for that. I want to be, and my coaching to you is you be involved in what it looks like, what storage system you're going to use, who's going to erect the storage system. Sometimes the self-storage fabricators say you've got to use our company or our crews to come in and do it. Other times they let you select and they'll give you a list of names. Interview and price it out if you can. And then I go to our construction manager and I really ask them to support me in getting some of the other trades that are local to the area, like electricians, plumbers, concrete companies, HVAC companies, fencing companies, and security companies. But I'm very involved, and I coach you to be very involved in working with all of those. So for example, you might want to use a security system from a national self-storage vendor, and you want to make sure that the local security company is qualified and will install and work with the system that you select that will integrate well with your operating software. So as an owner, I want to be very involved in the process. That's why we're using construction managers. Also helps keep the cost down. You know, it might be cost plus 5, cost plus 6%, as opposed to just turning it over to a general contractor. And the construction manager is responsible for organizing the job site, organizing the subs in, the sequence of events that happens on the job site. They'll create the schedule that goes to our bank, and they're in charge of overseeing the construction process on site. We, as the owners, work with that person to select who's going to be doing the work and what it's ultimately going to look like. Engineer drives the approval process, and then once it's approved and the site work starts, engineers for the most part are done. Sometimes they'll be involved in the inspection. That's literally the process we go through. I typically don't make my close contingent on getting a building permit, because sometimes it can be real quick, sometimes it can take 6-8 months to go through the approval process. But if our engineers indicate that there's probably not going to be a long delay, that we'll be able to get the permits, here's the sequence of events, you don't need a zoning change, you don't need a lot of variances, we'd probably go on and close on the property and then complete the process. Now, I know for many of you, myself included, when I was contemplating getting in the storage business, I was not contemplating on getting in the construction business or being involved in a lot of construction. I've learned, though, that to be successful in life, you've got to be putting yourself in situations that are outside your comfort zone. For many of us, construction is outside our comfort zone. If you have construction background and knowledge, great. This will be much easier for you because it's self-storage. But if it's not something you have a lot of experience with, it's something that you can learn. And yes, you'll make mistakes, But for the most part, your mistakes probably aren't going to be fatal mistakes that cost a lot of money. Expand yourself, stretch yourself, move and do things and develop skill sets that are necessary to be successful today. Once you're outside your comfort zone, that's where all the magic in life happens. So you work at developing that skill. By the way, I have a course at the Quick Start Academy called How to Build Your First Self-Storage Facility. It comes at it from a non-construction point of view. It talks about the process, no matter whether you're building new construction, expansions, or conversions. The process is pretty much the same. We'll work for all of those. If you think that could support you, go check it out at thequickstartacademy.com. But if you can work on developing this skill set today, you can be in the self-storage business. And the sooner you're in the self-storage business, the sooner you're creating the wealth that this product affords us. There's no business better than the self-storage business. You just have to learn certain skill sets today, and this is one of them. So thank you very much. I look forward to being with you next week as we wrap this series up on the skill sets needed, and I'll see you then. My name's Mark Helm. I'm the author of Creating Wealth Through Self-Storage, and I'm the creator of the Storage World Analyzer, and that is the financial analysis tool we use to look at the cash flows that this expansion we're working on is going to create. That tells me what I want to do, whether I want to do the deal, and what I need to bring the acquisition and the construction budget in at to get the returns we want. If you're not using it, I invite you to go look at it. StorageWorldAnalyzer.com or CreatingWealthThroughSelfStorage.com, Storage World Analyzer. Thank you very much, and I look forward to being with you again soon.